What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 6 of Virginia is for Conspiracy Lovers. I'm Ernie, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, Daniel. Say hi, Daniel.
Hey, I'm Daniel. I talk low. I have a master's degree. I wear super smart looking glasses. And I don't believe any of this shit.
Well, thank you, Daniel. um, so today, I apologize for that. That's ridiculous. Um, today we are going to talk about the skull of Blackbeard, which is a kind of a subject that's another one that's near and dear to my heart because it touches on my hometown again, Williamsburg. It's for all the plasticness that is Williamsburg. It's like Orlando nowadays, just golf courses and chain restaurants. Some of the most incredible things in history, early colony history, happened right there in that little town. And so we're going to talk about Blackbeard's skull, which is missing. I don't know if you knew it was missing, but
I knew it was missing.
thank you, Daniel. I'm not going to do that anymore. I swear. All right. So let's get into it. This is probably going to be a two-parter. I've been looking into the Blackbeard skull mystery for a little while now, and as I was going over my notes, I don't think I can fit everything into it and in one episode. So um, we'll probably pick it up again with a part two, maybe not the next episode, but possibly the one after that or after that. But by that time, Daniel will be a little less lively, or a little more lively or less. I don't know. He's pretty low key. Anyway, so I'm gonna get into it. Blackbeard skull, really to understand the whole mystery and what happened to Blackbeard's skull and his head and where it may have ended up and why it may have ended up there. You I kind of have to go back and ramble about Templars and um uh Merovingians and all that nonsense. So to kind of look at where it may have gone, you kind of have to look at where pirates almost in general come from, um, or where they may have come from, where some people have theorized that they came from. Um, I got some slides here, so you don't have to look at me and Dead Daniel as much. So I'm gonna start this little slideshow. Here we go. Blackbeard's skull. So, as we talked about a little bit in the last episode, the Templars were kind of gifted a large portion of La Rochelle, France. It's in the south of France. Again, remember that this comes from the Merovingians to the Plantagenets. And then in the, I believe, 1100s, it was kind of given to the Templars, like a lot of properties were when they were the um, big guys on the block. And they used it as their kind of port fleet base. So that's where the Templar fleet sailed from. Um, yeah. So Merovingians hailed from the south of France. Again, Merovingians are that supposed bloodline of Christ. The theory put out there is that Christ had a child with Mary Magdalene, and that bloodline exists to this day, and that secret is what has been hidden for years and years. You just go watch the Da Vinci Code. There is some truth to those theories. I don't think there's any truth to a Christ child, but I think there is truth to a bloodline of people who think that there is one and that they may be part of that. Um, so again, Templars, they end up here at La Rochelle. It's where they base their fleet. During the Crusades, they assisted King Roger. That's this fella here. That's King Roger, I think the second of Sicily. Now, King Roger had an issue right around the Crusade times with Muslim pirates, and so he enlisted the help of the Knights Templar and their fleet to come down Sicily way and help him out. Now, this is King Roger of Sicily, and he was also known as King Roger the Jolly. Um, and the skull and crossbones is what the Templars flew when they were defending King Roger of Sicily and just Sicily in general. They flew the skull and crossbones flag, which came to then be known as the Jolly Roger, which is a super interesting origin story for the skull and crossbones. I think that's why they called it the Jolly Roger, but I don't think that it's why the Templars chose it as their kind of intimidation, as their kind of intimidation tactic. So, well, that's the Ark of the Covenant. I clicked the button too quickly, but I'll get into it. So, the theory behind the skull and crossbones is this. Again, this is retreading over some stuff I think I've said at some point in this on this podcast. But when the Templars were formed during the Crusades, let me turn my page. Yeah, so while when the Templars were formed during the Crusades, it was 9 quote unquote poor knights, and they were all they were all second sons of noble families from France. They gave themselves the poor knights moniker. I don't know if they gave that to themselves or if it was given to them. I think they called themselves the Knights of the Temple. I don't think they really had a name when they first came out there. The interesting part about them is that they came to the Crusades, 9 of them, and they immediately got an audience with the new king of Jerusalem. And for the life of me, I can never remember this dude's name, but I always remember it's a really cool sounding name, but I can never remember what it is. But they meet with him. He likes their idea, whatever it is they pitch to him, and he likes it so much that he sets him up on the Temple Mount. Literally, I believe it was the stable area of what was thought to be the area where the original temple, Solomon's temple, was built. So he gives them that space. They set up shop, and they don't start doing Templar night stuff for a while. I think it was like a full year that in that area they just something I just realized is that I never shared my screen. So I'm looking at my PowerPoint, but you guys aren't. So let me let me go back real quick, and then I'll share that screen, and we'll blow through those first couple of slides that I was um babbling through for a while. Let me make sure this is sharing. Yeah, share the screen. There we go. Now we're sharing the screen. So we'll go back to the little slideshow here. Blackbeard Skull, La Rochelle, Templar Fleet. Um, there's King Roger the Jolly. There's the Jolly Roger, and there's that Ark of the Covenant, or a replica of one, right there. So anyway, they all they do for like that first year, or thereabouts, is they dig. They're digging under where the temple sat, and there's all kinds of different theories on what they may or may not have found underneath that temple area. Whatever it was important to someone, to the Pope and the Catholic Church in particular, because all at once, at some point, they packed up their stuff, they cruised back to the Pope, and they had a closed meeting with the Pope. And within a month, he puts out a papal bull saying basically that the Templars are made guys, man. They're untouchable. They owe no fealty to any kings, queens, or nations, countries, laws. They are their own boss, other than the papacy. They answer to God and they answer to the Pope, and that's it. Their donations, which were hefty donations. Anybody who joined the poor Knights of Christ, the Knights Templar, had to take a vow of poverty. And so all these glory seeking second sons of nobility who joined to be knights, when they came in, whatever land holdings they had, whatever money they had, it all went to the order. And so anyway, he makes palpable bull. They're made men. They found the theory is they found something under where the temple was. And some of the theories are the Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny, treasure, documents. One of the most interesting ideas, theories as to what they may have found, and I don't necessarily buy it, but it is interesting, and it does kind of inform what we're talking about, and what it informs what we're talking about to a certain degree. And that's that they found ossuaries. Now these are big stone boxes that the Jews would bury their dead in, and the process was to so here you can see a actual ossuary with the top off, containing the bones of somebody's dead relative. And what's interesting is that there was a specific way that they would put the bones into the box. They basically fill the box up with all the bones, leaving the two femur bones and the skull out, and then they would cross the femur bones and put the skull on top of that, on the very top of the rest of the bones. And then that's how, that's generally how, even when they're found now in these different tombs and caves and things, that's generally how they found it. And the theory is that's where the Jolly Roger came from. The theory is that's where Memento Mori came from. Is this very kind of striking image of, opening up these kind of tomb boxes, and staring you right in the face is a skull and crossbones. This is obviously this is kind of a depiction of that, but this is kind of to show this is actually the logo or the emblem, the badge of the Skull and Bones Secret Society at Yale University. 322. We'll get to that much later. But you've got the two femur bones, and then you've got obviously the skull right there. Now the way they do this is that it's pretty cool. I found this picture. I was pretty stoked. This is actually like a an ossuary cave. So here, this is the cave, and you would obviously, as it's labeled here, you would lay your loved one after it was dressed, and I guess Shiva was sat. You would put the body in here, allow it to decay for a year. It even has this crazy gross drain for body fluids. And then you would have those boxes made. You'd stack the bones the way you're supposed to, and then you would put them up in these compartments here. And then it would become kind of a family mausoleum crypt, if you will. Ossuary found. So what's interesting is those the theory is, and this is actually not, it's what the modern order of the Knights Templar, like the multinational huge order of the Knights Templar, what they claim is one of the artifacts that they found during the Crusades, and this is coming straight from the Grand Master of the modern day Knights Templar. Amongst other things, they claim that they found the ossuary of Yeshua, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist is pretty interesting. Well, they're all really interesting, but John the Baptist is really interesting because of how much the Templars kind of venerated and the claims as to how they venerated Saint John the Baptist. And then when you look forward to what many think and what I think is the continuation of the Templars down through the ages up to present day Freemasons, they still hold they're not a religious society, but they do hold a feast day that's celebrated every year, in St. John's feast, and it's for John the Baptist. And there were actually, in history, there's been several cults who have venerated John the Baptist and almost looked to him as their deity above Christ. Maybe we'll get into one of those at some point, but if we find one in Virginia, but I thought that was pretty interesting. So the Knights Templar claim today, the Knights Templar claim that they found the bones of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and John. And they claim that they found evidence that Mary Magdalene not only had a child with Jesus, but she also had a child with John. Those children were spirited away from the Holy Land. And then it's claimed that they were hidden in southern France, and then the bloodline was hidden in England, and then Scotland, and then we get the Da Vinci Code. What is kind of interesting is years later in modern day, somebody came across, they were like digging a well or building an addition to their house somewhere in the Middle East, and they busted out a wall that opened up a cavern that was very similar to this like kind of ossuary cave. And what they found was, if I'm not mistaken, they found a ossuary that was inscribed with the name Yeshua, and then there were like two other ones, and they kind of matched up with the names of Jesus's brothers, or maybe maybe Joseph, and then one of his, probably, I can't remember completely. I watched a whole documentary on it. But then that those ossuaries were actually empty. There's been a lot of critical dispute about uh the age of those particular ossuaries didn't match up. I don't think that Jesus's bones were left behind personally, but that's my personal worldview. Um, so that being said, the Knights Templar, I know this is really far away from early 1700s Blackbeard, but I swear I'm getting there. I'll just touch it, and then we'll have to wait for the next installment of this one. But I promise it comes together. So he finds they supposedly find these ossuaries. That's part of their hoard. I just recently listened to an interview with the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, the modern day Templar, and he claims that the Knights Templar have two vaults, hidden vaults in North America, and then several around the globe where they hide things like this. And supposedly, in the next couple of years, they're going to release all this stuff for DNA testing and things like that. So that'll be interesting if that ever does happen. All right, so moving on. That's what they think they found. What I think they found, if anything, and what a lot of people who point to this Templar pirate connection think they found is maps, and particularly maps and information describing the supposedly unexplored rest of the world that were Phoenician in origin. And this is where Daniel goes,
Oh, there goes those Phoenicians again.
but really, the Phoenicians were involved in the building of the original temple. The king of Tyre, Hiram, who incidentally is the origin story for Freemasonry. They claim that the first master mason was Hiram, um, king of Tyre, and that their whole origin story is about Hiram and how he held the secret to the master mason building of the original temple, and then some apprentices or thugs of some sort wanted those secrets. He wouldn't give it to them. They clubbed him over the head and killed him, and then the story goes on from there. I believe he rose again, Hiram. I'm not sure, but anyway, there was a real Hiram. He was the king of Tyre, and he sent Phoenician builders and also timber to Solomon to build the first temple. Okay, so the theory is that if they found anything of importance, and this could kind of make sense as well, um, even with the whole going to the Pope and saying, "Hey, we got some dirt. You need to give us some extra privileges." Now, yeah, if they had found the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant or the Spear of Destiny or some paperwork, papyri that said that uh, Jesus was Mary Magdalene's baby daddy, yeah, for sure that would be something that the church would want to keep under wraps and would be worth uh, giving this order of knights a lot of kind of extra privilege. But also, I think in a more realistic sense, if they had, the world was very small at that time, around the time of the Crusades. The Atlantic Ocean supposedly hadn't been crossed yet. And I think the Catholic Church did a lot to suppress a lot of the seafaring um, communities and peoples who were known for exploring. And so, if in the 1100s this order of knights find a wealth of maps outlining the rest of the quote unquote unknown world, um, that all of a sudden gives people a chance to go populate those unsettled areas, and it ends up, it could loosen the control that the Catholic Church really benefited from. And really, I say Catholic Church, but this is, we're talking about Rome. I mean, I've heard it said that that Rome didn't really fall, it just kind of rebranded into the Holy Roman Empire, which continues to this day. So anyway, I'm getting off topic, but so this is actually a copy of the Piri Reis map. The Piri Reis map is a medieval map that, in the explanations of the map, it says that it was copied from much earlier maps, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of year old maps. And what you have now, I don't read whatever this is written in, and it's too small, but I've heard the Piri Reis map explained, and that like some of these different areas here, Daniel fell over.
I'm okay. I'm okay. This is very interesting, Ernie. Continue.
um so anyway, yeah, so some of these areas here, and I don't know if it's down here or up here, but it shows like parts of North America, parts of South America, even Antarctica. And this wasn't knowledge that anybody was supposed to have. So long story short, long story long, I think, and some others think, that what they found underneath that temple may have been a wealth of maps, and that gives, that lends some credence to the later history of the Knights Templar, because as we know, I was supposed to click forward. This is a depiction of a Phoenician ship. Anyway, they were a seafaring people who navigated and made lots of maps, whatever. But in 1307, as we know, the Knights Templar were outlawed. They were rounded up, imprisoned, tortured, and they the reason for it, and I think there's some truth to it, is that at that point they had become the largest really corporation on the planet. I mean, they created banking, in that after they acquired all of this wealth from all of their members by the late 1200s, early 1300s. I mean, they were the most powerful, wealthy organization on the planet. And they did it, later on, after they got more established in the Holy Land, they did start providing protection for pilgrims heading to the Holy Land. And with all these properties, and so much wealth spread out all over the known world, what they could do is, say somebody from Ireland wanted to visit the Holy Land, they could go to the local Templar preceptory, give them all their money, and then the Templars would write them a coded, basically a check, and they'd load up all their stuff. They'd take them on their really long journey. You needed a lot of money to be able to go make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And so they set up this system where you give them all their money in your hometown there, or your home country, and then you have this coded message, that once you get to the next place and you need some more money on your on the road to the Holy Land, you find the next Templar outpost, you hand them that check, they go, cool, you've got this much in the account, here's the supplies you need, and you keep going. And so that allowed them to create even more wealth for themselves. Anyway, the king of France, Philip, I think it was Philip the Fair, I can't remember what number Philip he was, he might have been Philip the First, I can't remember, but he had taken out a bunch of loans from the Knights Templar. I mean, that's how powerful and wealthy they were. They were they were lending money to the royalty of different countries, and they were lending money to the Catholic Church itself. And so the story is that Philip, the Templars side of things, the Templar apologists, uh, and the like, their side of things is that they owed Philip owed the Templars a bunch of money. So Philip secretly went to the Pope, and was like, "Hey, man, these guys are getting too powerful. We need to shut them down." Basically, so he didn't have to pay him back. And this is kind of um, propped up by the fact that he had, if just before this, before the Templars were outlawed, he had kicked all the Spanish out of France, and it was because I guess he owed the Spanish a lot of money. I guess they spent a lot of money, so he kicked all the Spanish out of France. It was illegal to be Spanish in France at that time. And then the next group was uh Jewish people. There was a huge like deportation of all the Jewish people in France, and it supposedly it was because there was a lot of money lenders um, within the Jewish community in France, and he owed them money, and so he kicked them out. And then next on the hit list was the Knights Templar, and he, whichever Pope it was, I can't remember at this point, but he agreed with it. And then they brought down these charges of heresy on the Knights Templar. And the specific, I mean, it went, these charges of heresy went really deep. And you can actually, I actually recently downloaded some of this, some of the accounts. Now, remember, a lot of things were confessed to by Knights Templar, but a lot of it was confessed to under extreme torture. Um, but could there have been some truth to some of it? To see what the Templars, you know, turned into, and kind of how their different factions, secret factions that lasted past this time, and then into the modern era, into Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism and whatnot. Um, yeah, I think at the very least they were a Gnostic sect, which is kind of an inversion of Christianity. So, technically speaking, and by a strict study of the fact that the church ran the world at that time, then yes, they would have been heretics. But then there were also really intense things, like there was a claim that they part of their initiation was peeing on the cross. Part of their initiation was doing butt stuff with each other. um Part of their initiation, or part of their ritual, was a divination exercise where they would supposedly um speak to and speak to a brazen head. And a little further down the uh the presentation here, I'll show you what a brazen head looks like. And they changed over the years. And a brazen head was this, either a skull that was dipped in bronze, and I believe it was a Babylonian kind of magi method of divination. And so it was like a skull or a head that you built, like a mechanical head where the mouth would move. Um, and you would ask it questions, and it would, whatever magic juju you put on that thing, it would speak to you. Well, a common story is that they had actually, another thing they may or may not have found while in the Holy Land. One of their relics is supposedly they found the head of John the Baptist, and that was the specific claim from the Roman Empire, is that, or the Holy Roman Empire, is that they were using the head of John the Baptist for divination purposes. And not only that, that they venerated John the Baptist and worshiped John the Baptist. So again, um, the claim was heresy on heresy on heresy. So um, they get outlawed. They round up all the ones that they can, torture them for a while, burn them at the stake. Again, um, Friday the 13th, October, Friday the 13th, 1307 is when they round them up. Um, and that's why Friday the 13th has the unlucky, kind of connotation to this day. Um, so they round up the ones they can. They clearly can't get all of them, and a ton of them escaped into other knightly orders. Some of the Templars that they captured and had in captivity, if they finally relented and admitted to what they were being accused of, they would release them, but they would only release them into other orders. They had to take vows of whatever in different um, um, with different monks and things like that, so they could join other orders, but they couldn't be Templars anymore, and they kind of couldn't be free to do whatever they wanted. And so a lot of them escaped into that, but a lot of them, and we know this because we know that the Templars had a fleet of roughly 18 ships, maybe more, maybe less, parked at La Rochelle, back to La Rochelle in France, and a lot of them escaped there. Uh, Supposedly, nobody's ever found their hoards of treasure and wealth, which, like we said, was vast. And supposedly, the Templars who were left, they jumped on these ships and they took off. Now, a little bit of credence is lended to that idea that they may have found maps, um, because the next part of their story is, nobody ever knew where the ships went. Nobody ever knew where the treasure went. But the next part of their story is that basically from 1307 for the next few hundred years, they just kind of pirated and explored around the globe. Um, Even so much as they possibly made it to North America. And there's a handful of things that point to them having actually stepped foot and possibly buried things here in North America. This thing on the screen right now, this is the Kensington Runestone. And this Kensington Runestone, obviously, it's got Viking runes, but there is a ton of overlap and kind of working together with the Vikings and the Templars. That's kind of a known thing. And within this Kensington Runestone, that appears to be a Viking making, there is I don't know if it shows it on here, but this guy, Scott Walter, he does a lot of work on the Knights Templar. He's a member of the modern order of the Knights Templar. And within this, he's kind of broken it down and found a lot of Templar symbolism in it. You've also got the Newport Tower, which they claim is this is in Newport, Rhode Island. They claim this was a for root store, like root vegetable storage or grain, um, or that it was like pilgrim built. But it's clear to people who know Templar construction, because that's the other thing, man. While they, when they were gaining all this wealth, and this is another link to modern Freemasonry, is they were master masons. They built these crazy cathedrals and castles and churches and chapels and whatnot. And so for the people who are super familiar with their construction methods, a lot of them look at this Newport Tower in Rhode Island, which nobody really knows where it is. And if I'm not crazy enough, I believe that Benedict Arnold may have owned the property that this was on, and it was already there when he bought the property. That was a little side quest there, but I can't remember exactly how they worked out. But some people attributed it for a while, I believe, to Benedict Arnold, but it's much older. So one of the interesting things about the Newport Tower, and that points to the Templars, is that on a certain date, like all these columns, and there's these different holes in the walls that are aligned to certain, you know, solstices and equinoxes and whatnot. And on a certain date, they figured out that the sun shines specifically through like one of these small little holes, and it points the beam of light. It's kind of cool. I've seen pictures of it. The beam of light shines straight down, and then it points right on one of these keystones here. And the keystone is a huge piece of symbolism within Freemasonry. And so this beam of light, it's kind of like the Georgia Guidestones in that, it comes through this hole, it points on this keystone, but then if you follow that alignment, all the way across that, and I can't remember where the Kensington runestone was found. I want to say like Minnesota or something like that. Like a farmer dug it up when he was plowing his field, but it actually points to the exact site that the Kensington runestone was found. All right, moving on. So Newport Tower is a possible piece of proof that they were here. Kensington runestone. This is called the Shipstone. This was found in Massachusetts, and it is a supposed Templar carving from what they can tell. This is an Oak Island or near Oak Island rock carving, and you've got the Templar cross here. I can't remember what these circumpuncts are supposed to mean, but these dots here mean something. And then next to it is a leaf of tobacco, and then I can't remember some other leaf, and it was supposed to. They believe that it represents kind of a kind of truce or friendship with the natives. And like I said on the last episode, the Micmac tribe up in that area of Nova Scotia, they have a lot of symbols within their artwork and their past that are very similar to Templar symbols. And in their history, they claim a brotherhood of white folks who came over super early, bearded armored guys on big ships. So that there's a little double evidence there. This is from Oak Island here. This is a lead cross that they've dated way back. The components of this lead, they've done chemical study on it and found that it came from the Middle East, and that it is from around the time of the Crusades. And then you've got this here, and I don't want to piss anybody off. I just heard about this place, and this is I want to say in New Mexico, but I might be wrong on that. But somebody compared some of the construction here to the Newport Tower. Now, I'm not sure, and I don't want to piss off any Native Americans by giving the credit to the Templars here, but somebody who knows a lot more than me did point to this site as its construction being different from the construction of other Pueblo dwellings, and that it pointed towards the Newport Tower. I'm not sure about that one, but it goes on and on with these Templar carvings and things like that in North America, and then here in South America even. This is what they call the Templar Cave in Brazil, and this is a cave with a Templar cross carved above it. There's a whole documentary about this. I want to say it's called the Brazilian Templar Cave or something like that. I watched it years ago. It's really cool. It's really interesting. And then let me oh yeah. So, and then beyond just this physical evidence, you have a ton of native tribes people all over North America, and then obviously in South America too, who talk in their history about um, people who look like this guy, um, people who look like that guy that I just got rid of, showing up on their shores, and becoming friends with them, and intermingling with them, and so much so that when Columbus came over in 1492, flying the Templar cross, which I know a lot of people have argued that it was a Spanish cross. One, he wasn't Spanish. He was working for the Spanish, but really he wasn't even working for the Spanish. He he came to the table with an idea about um, going over the ocean and claiming some territory that um, the Spanish would benefit from. He had already screwed up, I believe, with the Italian, which he was Italian, um, and like he went on a voyage before the 1492 voyage, and I think because of storms or something like that, he had to turn back, and so the Italians had wasted a bunch of money, and so he wasn't going to be able to do it for them. So he goes to the Spanish, and the way he pulled that up, anyway. So when he pulled up, I mean, it's kind of a common um, idea that people say that they thought these ships and these people were gods because they had never seen something so big. These natives had never seen something so big, or ships these large, or people so white, or whatever it was, and they thought they were gods, and that they, I think even Graham Hancock like goes into, you know, the idea of Viracocha and the Mayan gods being white folks or something. I don't know, but what I think it was, and what some people have postulated, is that they're it just looked like their boys were back. You know what I mean? These guys who had been coming over and interacting with them, possibly Templars, you know, they're flying the sign, and so that's why they didn't like get ready for war, fight back. Is that they thought these were our friends coming back across the ocean to see us, and it may or may not have been a. Some people have claimed that maybe Columbus was a descendant of Templars and maybe continuing that tradition. But I think more people who I trust a little bit more think that it was kind of an underhanded, kind of nefarious plot, um, to get over there, because Columbus married this lady. This lady was what's her name? She was a Portuguese noblewoman, who was in a convent. Um, uh, Columbus pulled this woman out of a convent. She was a Portuguese noblewoman. Her father was a Portuguese knight of Santiago for Henry the Navigator, the king of Portugal. Okay. And now Portugal has an interesting history in that during the Crusades, it became its own state, um, and had a large Templar presence. So much so that Henry the Navigator, obviously the navigator, the Portuguese were a seafaring people. They create their own state. Um, they were supposedly in possession of Phoenician maps, had maps of their own. They'd been out on boats a lot. And so the idea is that he marries, pulls this girl out of a convent, marries her basically for the maps, possibly the maps. Now, this is the seal that Henry the Navigator, now he's supposedly there's a document out there that that proves that Henry the Navigator was initiated into the Order of the Knights Templar. Um, This is actually a charter. Um, this is a charter from 1159 where Henry the Navigator allows the Knights Templar to own 1/3 of Portugal. Um, and as you can see, there's this Knights Templar symbolism here. It said that he joined the order, and then he gives them a third of his kingdom, and he had just got the kingdom. It just had become a nation, and he gives a third of it of his hard fought nation to the Knights Templar. So I think there's pretty good evidence to say that Henry the Navigator was one of the order. Portugal was probably created and pushed along into, kind of statehood there, probably by the order. And then Columbus comes along, marries up the daughter of one of Henry the Navigator's top guys, possibly gets some maps, some information, goes to Spain with it and says, hey, let's go check out this area before, I don't know, the descendants of the Templars take it all. Excuse me. Um, yeah, so these are the supposed, well, these are an example of, whatever, it's just stock photo. But all right, so that's the idea, and that's kind of the connective tissue between the Templars being outlawed. They've got this information, they've got these maps, they've got a secret, they need somewhere to hide it. And then they just spend the next few hundred years a seafaring kind of brotherhood. Um, and then so we get to Blackbeard finally. This is a depiction of Blackbeard here, one of the older depictions of Blackbeard. With his hair on fire, he used to create a scarier appearance. He would put cannon fuse into his beard and his hair and light him on fire before he took over a ship, so it would look like he was like kind of coming at these people like a demon in this like smoky haze. I don't think he just hung out on the beach with his hair on fire, but it's a pretty cool picture. So I found out some new information. It's not that new, it's about 10 years old, but my whole life, we're right down the road from where Blackbeard was killed and where he kind of had his pirate parties down in near Ocracoke in the Outer Banks. And so I've always been interested in him. I've always had a Blackbeard's flag, which we'll get to later, probably in part two, is not his flag. All the ones that I've had on every car or truck or skateboard or surfboard I've ever had, they were never. That was never his flag. His flag was probably definitely a lot closer to just the original skull and crossbones. All accounts of people who had been overtaken by Blackbeard, they never described the flag of the horned skeleton holding a hourglass and a dart with a heart that's got 3 drops of blood. That was a later there's a later element to the story that could have actually come from a pirate by the name of Quelch, but more than likely it was made up by somebody with a really interesting background. Spoiler alert: he was a member of Skull and Bones who wrote a book about pirates and their treasure. He's the one who created what we all think is Blackbeard's flag, but it wasn't. And I think there's something to the flag that he described in his book. And we'll get into that later on down the road. So, what I found out here recently about Blackbeard is that, we always thought, I knew from a pretty young age that he was a pirate of the Caribbean. But it was thought for years that he might have some North Carolina ancestry, that he probably came to the colonies from England. Most reports say left from Bristol, but really that's where everybody left from, was Bristol. It was a port town. And that, and because they found people with a similar last name there, which could still possibly be the case. But yeah, so we've always thought Blackbeard uh, could possibly have some North Carolina origin story, especially since that's kind of where he decided to hang out, and that he was a bad dude, and that he was one of the cooler pirates of the era. But what a man named B.C. Brooks, who studies genealogy, found, and he was only able to find this information out, I think, in 2014, because very strange. The Church of Latter-day Saints, who are genealogy obsessed. I think they own ancestry.com. They definitely are the folks behind either one of the spit in a cup and find out what percentage Mongol or Viking you are systems. That's a story for another podcast. But the two main ones, I don't know if y'all who are listening know this, but the two main ancestry spit in a cup systems that we have out there that everybody's using these days. One was started, I believe, at MIT, and it was a CIA funded project. And the other one is the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints. Now, the CIA one's a little bit creepy because I just think they're collecting our DNA so they can sprinkle it on crime scenes and have more patsies. Um, the the Mormon Church, as weird as it is and as kooky as their reasoning for it, is they actually have a ritual that they do, a posthumous um, kind of ritual that they do. And I've been told this by a Mormon, a Utah Mormon, so like a legit Mormon. um, but there's this posthumous ritual that they do, where they can save somebody. They think that they can save somebody's soul and send them to heaven if they do this ritual right, on their death, or not on their deathbed, but over their body. Um, And what I was told was that the idea behind them being obsessed with genealogy and ancestry and DNA is that they're trying to collect as much of the DNA in the whole, you know, from the world as they possibly can, so they can do a big, massive ritual and send everybody to heaven. Which, hey, man, it's just another piece of evidence to show that Mormons are big old sweetie pies. They they want everybody to come to heaven, whether or not you go to church with them or not. Now, my worldview, I don't think that that's going to work, but I think it's a nice thought. Um, so, moving on, B.C. Brooks, big into genealogy. He actually finds a baptism uh, record from Jamaica, um, with the Thatch family. Now, for years, we've all been told that Blackbeard's name was Edward Teach, because people reporting on him, contemporaries of his, and people that they captured who may have been on his cruise, and pirates who may have known him, it was always some derivation of the word teach, tatch, thatch, theach. Uh, but they knew his name was Edward, and some derivation of teach. And they landed on teach for a long time. But what B.C. Brooks found was a wealthy plantation owning family in Jamaica, with the name Thatch. And not only that, the patriarch of the family, the father, his name was also Edward Thatch, okay, or Theach. And he was a ship's captain who came over to Jamaica and had a wife, left England, and I believe from Bristol, Um, left England, came over to Jamaica. Believe his first wife died. I think it's a little confusing. They're not sure if the woman he remarried was Blackbeard's stepmom or it was his mom. But regardless, he came over to Jamaica, had some kids in Jamaica, married a woman named Lucretia, and they were a successful, wealthy plantation owning family in Jamaica, and there's actual physical written evidence. Um, oh, but back to the Mormons. Yeah, the reason nobody could find it is because you either had to go dig through records at these old defunct churches down in Jamaica, um, and nobody knew it, but the Mormons had collected all this genealogy and information in the 60s and they sat on it until the 2000s and then they kind of released it into their website. And that's how this guy came across it. So it looks like Blackbeard, Edward Thatch, is actually Edward Thatch Jr. He was born in Jamaica. Um, records. Oh, this is awesome. There was never any kind of background on his sailing prowess. How did he become? There was no like kind of backstory on Blackbeard. We just knew he was a badass, right? And he was a great sailor, and he was a tough guy, and people worked for him. He was able to maintain crews for a little while. I mean, his whole pirating career was pretty short, but he was prolific um, in the prizes that he took. He really went at it. So they also found records that an Edward Thatch, son of Edward Thatch Sr., joined the Royal Navy in 1706 aboard the ship the Windsor. Now that ship fought in Queen Anne's War, and it was involved in a couple of engagements up in Canada, um, and specifically the battle to take over Port Royal up in Canada, like I believe the Nova Scotia ish area, which kind of points a big finger towards possible Oak Island and all that. Um, so the information on Blackbeard is still sparse, but we do know there's a good idea that he was where he was born, who his dad was, that he had brothers and sisters, um, and then there's also records that when the father died, his brother, who I'm blanking on the brother's name, he did have an older brother, right? And the brother, I believe, got the business or something like that. But the rest of the estate was left to Edward Thatch. And then they found more records that shows where it was around 1706 that his father died. So, like right before he joined the Royal Navy, his father dies. They they award him the estate, and then they've got written evidence where he signs the deed of ownership over to probably his stepmom, Lucretia Thatch. And then another really cool thing that he found is okay, so Blackbeard in these records, this Edward Thatch, he had a sister named Elizabeth, right? Roughly around his age. Well, another like census or baptism piece of literature that they came across shows another Elizabeth, a young Elizabeth, um, from Kingston, who was in the care of his stepmom. And what they're surmising from that is that I believe it was just Blackbeard, a brother, and a handful of sisters. And what they're surmising is that they weren't going to name a second daughter Elizabeth. They know about his brother and who he married and who his kids were. But this new Elizabeth comes along, and the idea is that Blackbeard had a kid before he joined the Royal Navy and started pirating, left her in the care of his stepmom, who continued to live well, and the plantation continued to be successful. And so the cool thing is there's some Blackbeard DNA out there. There's still a possibility that somebody's got Blackbeard blood in them, and I don't know. That's cool to me. And I know he was a criminal and he was supposedly bloodthirsty, but God, he's Blackbeard, man. He's cool. Yep. So signed the deed over, joined the Navy, and then it kind of goes dark. I believe Queen Anne's War ended in like 1714. Now remember, Queen Anne's War was part of the more that was kind of the North America theater of the War of Spanish Succession, right? Now, at the end of Queen Anne's War, that's when the Stuarts are out of England. Okay, now that sheds some light on the name of Edward Thatch Teach Blackbeard's ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, and it also points towards probably Jacobite leanings. Now, remember, the Jacobites are people who want, they start a revolution to get, I think it was actually like 1703 or 04 that the last Stuart is on the throne. But anyway, but remember that the Jacobites are also, they're the people behind wanting to return the Stuart dynasty back to the throne of England. And like we talked about in the last episode, they they come from Norman French, who come from possible Merovingian, and the Stuarts claim that they can trace their line back to the Merovingian bloodline, that Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene supposed bloodline. And so it's interesting because when you follow these theories, it's a lot of theories, it's a lot of connecting the dots, it's a lot of speculation. But when you connect the dots from the Merovingians to the Plantagenets to the Huguenots that we talked about in the last, to the Stuart dynasty, to the shove the Templars in there a couple spots back, and then to the Stuarts, and the Templar involvement in Scotland, where the Stuarts come from, and then the possibility that all the Templars took off and became these Merovingian Scottish crusader John worshipping pirates for the next few hundred years. You start to see like that connective tissue in between those people, possibly. It could all be horseshit, I don't know. But it is very interesting, and it does shed some light on that famous ship that they finally found down in Ocracoke, the Queen Anne's Revenge. This guy was most likely a Jacobite. Now I'm gonna blow through, because I don't know how long we've been doing this, but it's been a good while. I'm gonna blow through the rest of Blackbeard's kind of pirating history. That's in a million different places, in a million different books, with a million different kind of versions, and I'm just gonna hit some bright points to just kind of lay out, kind of from 1614 to 1618, this kind of short pirating career that Blackbeard had, so that we can kind of get into the meat of the skull just in time for me to say, all right, we'll pick this up on the next one, but it'll be a good cliffhanger. So real quick, it kind of goes dark from the end of the Queen Anne's War, to seeing this Edward Thatch guy pop up again. And he pops up, and the common story is that on the island, I believe the island of Jamaica, in Nassau, which had become sort of a kind of a pirate haven, almost this pirate brotherhood run egalitarian, and all these like kind of pirate camps in the Caribbean. It also points towards like kind of this Templar brotherhood, everybody's on the same level possibility, this kind of new Atlantis, freedom of everything, egalitarian kind of libertarian ideal, is that all these places, everything was voted on, everything was shared equally. You had captains and things like that, but everything was voted on. You could be voted off. You could, they created these articles of kind of rules, and before you signed on to any pirate ship, there was kind of like this layout of the laws of the ship and how that company of pirates was going to operate. It's kind of a small version of what the United States um kind of wanted to be. So anyway, in 1716 he meets Hornigold. Hornigold is a guy who started off as a privateer, which was just a legal pirate. That's when a country would you would go to work for your country, stealing the other country's stuff out on the ocean. He was really good at it. And then when pirating starts getting kind of outlawed and they're kind of pulling those privateer contracts back, Hornigold does a little bit more. He's met Blackbeard. They've kind of started creating this little fleet and really making some money. But Hornigold had kind of made his career as being a privateer, legally doing this stuff, and then kind of went off the rails there towards the end when the different countries were like, okay, we're not doing that anymore. So he joins up with Hornigold. Hornigold likes him. He makes him the captain of his own little sloop. Um, at some point in their working together, they run across Stede Bonnet. Now, this is another wealthy plantation owner who they call him the gentleman pirate because he just up and left his family, and he might be the only pirate who paid for his ship. He had his ship, the Revenge, built for him so he could go out and do some pirating. I think he was a bored guy and wanted some adventure. They run into Stede Bonnet, and they kind of get together, and Stede Bonnet confesses to Teach and Hornigold that his crew's not real happy with him. He kind of doesn't know his butt from a hole in the ground, and he agrees to let Blackbeard become the captain of the ship, and he'll just kind of be, the overseer, and Blackbeard does. He becomes the captain and the pretty much the de facto like force, and at that point Bonnet's just kind of along for the ride. And so yeah, so he takes over the Revenge, and then around 1717 piracy is getting so bad in along the east coast of the colonies and then down in the Caribbean that governments and governors and the crown start offering pardons. Like, hey guys, just pull on back into shore. You sign this pardon. No harm, no foul. You can go be regular citizens, and we're not going to hang you. So at that point, Hornigold actually jumps on it, takes his pardon. Actually, like a little while later, like he goes from privateer to pirate to taking this pardon, and then turns around and starts hunting all of his friends. He actually signs a contract to go out and be a pirate hunter for the colonies or for the crown or whatever. And that's just a little interesting side note. So from 1717 to about 1718, like I said, Blackbeard is prolific. He's crushing, and dozens and dozens of he takes dozens and dozens of prizes. They're doing well. They've built themselves a fleet basically of like I want to say 3 to 5 ships depending on the time. And they're a force. They're one of the biggest like pirate forces in the Caribbean and on the East Coast there. Um, uh, to the point where in I guess it's 1717, um, Blackbeard and his fleet there, they blockade the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, and they take some people hostage. And they have they're out on their ships, but they're blocking the harbor, and they're kind of threatening to lay the town to waste if um, this list of demands isn't met, and to kill these hostages. The pirates that they send ashore with the demands, I mean, they're in such the fleet is in such a position of power that these guys drop off the demands and then they go around kind of terrorizing the town, drinking, partying. While the town council gets together and is like, what should we do? Should we fight them or should we, we could probably take them. And they finally decide, no, we're not going to fight them because their demands are pretty reasonable. Really, all they wanted was medicine. And most of the medicine they were asking for was medicine for syphilis. So you got like several ships full of pirates who all got crotch rot and they just pull into to port and hold a town hostage so they can get some medicine for syphilis. And they finally decide, it was an argument, but the town of Charleston decides, all right, we're just going to give them the medicine. They give them the medicine, they pull up anchor and they get out of there, man. It's kind of a funny it's kind of a funny little period in Blackbeard's history. So shortly after that happens, the new governor in North Carolina, Governor Eden, announces a pardon. Okay. And at this point, I believe they've lost one of their ships or a couple. I think at this point, maybe they're down to only like 1 or 2 ships, Blackbeard's crew. And I think the writing was on the wall. There's actually a story in a book that I reference later from the 1800s, where I've never heard. I've read about and looked into Blackbeard for years, and um, I've never heard about this story, but there's some pretty good evidence to prove it might be true, and that's that right around that time in 1717, uh, Blackbeard shows up in Philadelphia, which from this book and from accounts at the time, apparently that was a thing. Pirates frequently hung out in the city of brotherly love, and it what happened is, all the pirates are outlawed. They're hunting down pirates and whatnot. The North Carolina governor has issued or announced that he's willing to issue pardons. Um, but they're not feeling the same way up in Philadelphia. And supposedly the story is Blackbeard and his crew end up in Philadelphia. Somebody recognizes them, and there's proof that the governor finds out it's in some document where he puts out a warrant basically and sends people out to go find Blackbeard and his crew because people are coming and telling them, hey, they're at the bar drinking. And um, one of the townspeople who liked Blackbeard and later said, hey, he was always polite and he paid well. One of these guys goes and finds them and tells them, and they immediately get in their ships, take off. Anyway, another little side mission there, but he comes back to North Carolina after that, and he takes advantage of Governor Eden's party. or pardon, and what would end up being a party too. So for a little while, a few months, maybe longer, I believe that was in May. It was a short time. It was like Eden's pardon. I don't remember. Yeah, it was in May. No, the blockade of Charleston was in May. And then very shortly after that, he takes that was in May of 1717, I want to say. Anyway, he takes the pardon. He This is a little bit shady too. He takes Governor Eden's party. He moves to Bath County on the mainland, right? And he sets up in this area in Bath County near the river, and there's accounts of people seeing him and the governor eating by candlelight. There's all these accounts of all these ships on the river being pirated. So it's almost like Eden, and Eden wasn't known for being super upstanding. Like he was kind of a shady character, this governor. And so the idea is basically Blackbeard just did some mild pirating while he took advantage and took a rest with this pardon in Bath County. Also, Bath, North Carolina, originally settled by Huguenots, which I find interesting. All right, so he moves to Huguenot. Supposedly, there's a possibility that he married a rich plantation owner's daughter. There's stories about that. We don't know if that's true or not, but it's a possibility. Um, Again, bunch of piracy on the local river. And then by August of 1818, he's had enough of land life, and he gets a ship and heads back out. Starts taking prizes and out on the ocean. And now Spotswood, the governor of Virginia, more established. He's actually kind of going through it in Virginia. He's made some decisions in Virginia that have a lot of people pissed off at him. And they were a lot of self-serving kind of decisions that we don't have time to really get into. But he decides on the sneak tip to hire a guy, a sailor, to go out and bring me Blackbeard's head, basically. Go take out the pirate, because everybody knows this guy's back out there doing it again. This is going to make me look good. It was kind of a publicity stunt. And I think that Spotswood had some Jacobite, some Stuart leanings, but at this point it doesn't matter. The Hanoverian line is in place now, and Spotswood, like I said, was kind of a self-serving guy, and I think that he did whatever he needed to do to stay on top. And if that meant saying, "Hey, King George is the greatest," that's what he was going to do. And if he needed to go out and take out this pirate to get a little love back on his side, he was going to do that too. And so Spotswood hires Captain Maynard. This guy's kind of, everybody talks about how tough and gnarly Blackbeard was, but I don't think enough people talk about how daring and adventurous this Captain Maynard was. And the thing is this was kind of an off the books. The way it kind of seems when you read about it is it wasn't. I don't think it was like a sanctioned, like from the crown pirate hunting mission. It seems a little bit more off the books. And he sends Maynard down. They get some information because one of Blackbeard's crew, when Blackbeard took his pardon in North Carolina, one of Blackbeard's crew took a pardon in North Carolina, ended up in Williamsburg somehow, right? Somebody recognizes him, and Spotswood has him brought in, and they grill him, And there's actually there's documentation of that kind of interrogation, and I think the guy's name was William Howard, and I think he was his master something. I can't remember. He was one of the guys higher up in Blackbeard's crew, and they Maynard and then they grill him, and he doesn't really give up much information about where he thinks Blackbeard is going, but from the documentation, he kind of settles on, all right, I'll tell you where we've been. I'll tell you what we've been doing for the last few months before we took the pardons. But that's all I'm going to tell you because I got this pardon right here. And really, that Governor Eden pardon, I don't think it was looked at as official as other pardons, especially like the ones coming straight from the crown. Um, so I think they kind of leaned on him with, yeah, that pardon's not really worth the paper it's written on. Um, and he finally came up off of some information. Well, some of that information was where Blackbeard liked to party with his other pirates, which was down Ocracoke way. And that's just where Maynard went. He gave him some other information, but I guess that was the closest. That was pretty nearby, and so that's where Captain Maynard took his two ships and went looking for him. He found him pretty quickly, by all accounts. Um, but Blackbeard took off. He knew the shallows and the shoals of that area of the Outer Banks and was able to slip in, working with the tides. He was able to slip into an area um where he could get in, but he couldn't get any further away, and Maynard was stuck further away, like with a kind of a sandbar or a shallow in between them until the tide came up, and then um, I believe they had gotten into a small engagement before he slipped away from them, and that kind of took out one of Maynard's ships. So Maynard's now down to like one ship, and Blackbeard is kind of in this area of water that he's floating in, but he can't go any further. And then Maynard is kind of just sitting just beyond like reach in his ship. And this is where the whole story comes from, how Ocracoke got its name. And they're basically screaming back and forth at each other what they're going to do to each other. And Blackbeard eh, gives that famous line, I'll show no quarter, basically. Like, when you get over here, it's on, and I'm playing for keeps. And um and so, and then the story about where Ocracoke gets its name is, the idea was, hey, when are we doing this? One of them shouts over to the other, and whichever one replies back when the old crow crows. I'm guessing, that meant morning, or some time when the tide would change, and they could the water would be deep enough and they could re-engage. Well, Maynard, while they're waiting, Blackbeard knows that he's done some damage. He's already lost one ship. He doesn't really know how, Blackbeard doesn't know how many people Maynard's got on his boat to fight. So Maynard, and they've recreated this in a lot of movies that involve like ship warfare, but it probably didn't start here, but he did have the idea of, he sent most of his sailors, most of the men on his ship, down into the hold, and they were under instruction not to come out until the pirates step foot on the ship. So Maynard pulls up to Blackbeard's boat, to the and or vice versa, and the pirates jump over onto this boat that looks pretty sparse of people to fight, and they're like, we took care of this pretty easy. And then all of a sudden, Maynard gives the signal, all these guys come up out of the hold, and they just annihilate the pirates. And in particular, they really went at Blackbeard. I mean, I want to say I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say there was like he had several bullet holes and like too many to count, like stab wounds, and he was still like going. And then finally he gives up the ghost, and this is where the skull comes in. I told you I was gonna get to it. Um, Finally he gives up the ghost. Maynard cuts his head off, ties it to the bowsprit of his of Maynard's ship, and he heads back to Williamsburg. Okay, so he's killed Blackbeard, thrown his body overboard, tied Blackbeard's head to the bow of his ship, and he cruises back to the Chesapeake Bay, then into the James River, and back to Williamsburg, where he returns or presents the head of Blackbeard to Governor Spotswood. Now, the story I always heard all my life growing up in Williamsburg is that um, Spotswood mounts or has the head mounted onto a pike, and they kind of parade it up and down Duke of Gloucester Street, the kind of main thoroughfare, right there in front of William and Mary in Williamsburg, and kind of in celebratory. We got the big bad wolf is dead, and then what happens with the head next is it's taken out to the mouth of the Hampton River, which empties into the Chesapeake Bay, and it's hung from a long pole at the mouth of that river as a deterrent to other pirates. And then they take all the captives that they took, all the pirates that they took, they try them and they hang them all. And then they take their bodies and they put them at the mouths of all the other rivers and the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, even as a further deterrent. Well, that head hangs there for some time. We don't know if it's a year, we don't know if it's months, but the story is that, good Lord, I haven't changed a slide in a minute. Hey, there's a Queen Anne's Revenge. There's Governor Spotswood. There's Maynard. And there's Blackbeard's head. So I think we're caught up on the slides here. Okay. So they've got Blackbeards hanging up. We don't know how long it was exactly, but all of a sudden this story pops up in history at some point that Blackbeard's head makes it to this place. Now this is Raleigh Tavern. This is a super important place in Williamsburg society, culture, government, revolution, secret orders, everything. I mean, the taverns really were the meeting places of the colonies, and they were used for multiple different reasons. So this here is Raleigh Tavern. Now, when you look up here, this top floor right here is what they referred to back then as the Apollo Room, okay, or the Apollo Hall, or the Hall of Apollo. And this was the site. This top floor of the Raleigh Tavern was the site of the first Masonic Hall in Williamsburg. Now we know that we don't know how early it started. I would venture to guess that it started at 1717 or slightly before, when the Grand Lodge of London was created. I think Masonry was already in town, just secretly. And then in 1717, the Grand Lodge of London is created, and that's kind of the coming out of Freemasonry, kind of quasi publicly. Hey, we're a thing. So we do know that an advertisement or a notice in the newspaper does talk about in the one of the newspapers in Virginia, in Williamsburg in particular, in the 1750s, talks about how there was a Masonic, that there's a Masonic brotherhood in the town, and that they had been meeting for a number of years in the Raleigh Tavern. So the idea is that by the 1750s, they've already been meeting for a number of years. So some people speculate maybe 1730s ish. But like I said, I think it was earlier. I think this whole country was kind of built with Masonic ideals, and I think William and Mary is part of that. Obviously, I think right from 1607, Francis Bacon's kind of Rosicrucian New Atlantis ideals were already here. So that's neither here nor there, but it's kind of there. Um, also, the first known collegiate secret society in this country also used the Apollo room, and that was the Flat Hat Club, of which Thomas Jefferson admittedly it was a member. That was a William and Mary secret society. It was the first one, kind of similar-ish to what later came down the road in the early 1800s, Skull and Bones, which will be important in part two. And then what I'm finding is, I think the most important is that same room was also where Phi Beta Kappa was created. Okay. Now, Phi Beta Kappa was not what it is today. In 1776, when it was founded in the upper room of the Raleigh Tavern, it was a secret society, period. It was not a honorary society for people who get good grades. It wasn't an academic achievement society. This was a secret society with an oath, with a set of rules, with a way that they tapped potential members. It had hand grip, a specific hand grip. It had a sign, the PBK, with. So let me get back to my slides here. Freemasonic meetings in the room of Apollo. This is probably the only flat hat society medal I think that they've ever found, by this guy Thomas Jefferson, a member of that. And then here's the PBK, the Phi Beta Kappa key. Now this is what is given to everyone who becomes Phi Beta Kappa as an honorary academic achievement society, fraternity, right up to present day. But this is the original jewel, they call it, within secret societies. You've got a grip, you've got a jewel, you've got your words, your oaths, and this is their jewel. And this key will come into play later when we take a look back at Blackbeard's supposed flag, that was described in the early 1900s by a member of Skull and Bones. And so we'll take a look at that. But you've got these three stars up here, which supposedly stand for, I think it's friendship, brotherhood, and loyalty or honesty, or it's three very kind of benign things. Then you've of course got the Phi Beta Kappa, and you've got this hand here that is pointing. I guess they claim it's pointing to PBK and the three kind of principles. Um, what's interesting here is the two fingers that are shown here. You've got the other three fingers held back, so you've got a 2, 3, and a 3. And then when you look at, I'll just give a little teaser here. When you look at the Skull and Bones, their number is 322, which there's all kinds of speculation as to why and where that number came from. I want to, with wild speculation, sort of prove by using Blackbeard flag decoding, that it comes from the opposite of Phi Beta Kappa. You've got 233 here, and with the Skull and Bones men, you've got this significant number of 322. So anyway, Phi Beta Kappa is started in 1776 in the Apollo room of Raleigh Tavern. Now, 12 of its founding members were Masons in the lodge that was meeting in the Raleigh Tavern. One of their founding members was Landon Cabal or Cabell, Caball. He was, now let me get this right, make sure I don't jump ahead here. Okay. Why is this important? Okay. So I didn't write this down in my notes, but and it is good God somewhere. Okay. Dang, I can't remember the I do Daniel.
Where's your citations?
Um, I actually do have citations and written in a book. Oh, you know what? I have that on another slide. I'll get to it. I think it should be here. Okay, in a book called America's Fraternities or something that was written in the 1800s, the author of that book claims that Phi Beta Kappa, that he has some sort of proof or some sort of knowledge that Phi Beta Kappa is a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati. I don't know how much credence I pay to that, but I find it kind of interesting. And he claimed that it's a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati was created by Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria in also the same year, 1776. But he claims that this secret society involved with William and Mary meeting in the same room as the Masons of Williamsburg, that they are a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati. And oh, there it is. Baird's Manual, American College Fraternities, the 12th edition. So this is in 1930, but he wrote it a lot earlier than this. Obviously, this is edition 12. Um, um, so he wrote that they were a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati, and that they were started by this guy. Now, I don't know that that's the case. I know that right around this time, just before this, um, Thomas Jefferson was the president of the college. He was back at the college. We know that because he had started to finish the building of the Wren building. They had actually started putting up walls to enclose it into the square that it was supposed to originally be. And then the revolution started. He was called away and he had to stop. And so that got abandoned and never got finished. But so I know he was there. I know that he was hanging out with a bacon obsessed, his bacon obsessed mentor, George Wythe. Um, but I'm not sure that Phi Beta Kappa was a branch of the Bavarian Illuminati, and I'm not sure that Thomas Jefferson was, but a lot of people were convinced by that book hundreds of years ago, a couple hundred years ago, and it is interesting. And this fella here, he was in place to do it and had knowledge of it. Um, now back to Landon Cabell or Cabal. He was one of the founding members of Phi Beta Kappa. Now remember, there are no Greek fraternities, right? There's only like 7 colleges in the country. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's an exaggeration, but like there are no Greek fraternities. This is the first Greek letter society that exists. So this isn't like a common thing. This isn't, beer pong and wet t-shirt contests. This is new, and it starts off at a secret society. And I'll go further in later on down in the second part of this about how um about to show you the difference and how different it was, and when it actually changed and into an academic achievement society and a public non-secret thing. And the timing of that is very, very interesting, in when considering Freemasonry, and when you also consider when um Skull and Bones and some other more secretive societies come on the scene, and who starts them and why they start them. So anyway, Bavarian Illuminati. Now we're back to Landon Cabal, Cable. Um, he was a founding member of. This is his tombstone here, Landon Cabal. This was supposed to pop up later. This skull cup, and it's not the original skull cup or whatever, but it's interesting looking, so I used it anyway. Landon Cabal. He was a founding member of Phi Beta Kappa, and Thomas Jefferson ends up working directly with four generations of working directly with him, and then four generations of the Cabell family. Thomas Jefferson and the Cabells are knit together for the rest of of Jefferson's life, and even prior to Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson, and Landon's father, Dr. I might be getting this. I think Dr. William Cabell, they worked together as surveyors before these guys, when these guys were in short pants. So it's interesting that Thomas Jefferson worked with four generations of the Cabell family. Just steadily. He always had them in their lives, from politics to plantations, and just it's deep. And that'll come into play again more in part two, when we talk about where I think I buried the lead. Yeah, I totally buried the lead. So the skull, back to Blackbeard's head. Anyway, I showed you everything with oh, I can't believe I did that. I showed you everything with Blackbeard's head and everything with Raleigh Tavern, but the whole point of that is that the head shows up at Raleigh Tavern, okay, later on, and it's reported that it shows up in the form of the skull dipped in silver and built into either a goblet or the bottom of the base of a punch bowl, okay? And it's mentioned a couple different places. Thomas Jefferson claims to have seen it, and then in John F. Watson's book, excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. In John F. Watson's book, it states that the skull was enlarged with silver, and I have seen those whose forefathers spoke of drinking from it. Um, so this skull, the myth, and it's the myth that I heard my whole life growing up, is that at some point they took the skull off the stick in the Chesapeake Bay, they brought it back, somebody dipped it in silver, made this punch bowl, it ended up in Raleigh Tavern, and a lot of people saw it. It was kind of a showpiece, supposedly. I think it was a bit more than a showpiece, and when you consider who was meeting at the Raleigh Tavern, which were these secret societies, and when you consider the kind of ritual and things that they do, I think that this skull goblet or cup takes on a different meaning and more significance. Like I said, Landon Cabell, Thomas Jefferson worked with his family for four generations. He was a founding member of Phi Beta Kappa. He was the guy too that in, I want to say 1780, when the revolution was kicking off, Landon Cabell goes and gets all of Phi Beta Kappa's paperwork, their box of their regalia, their jewel, their secrets and stuff like that. And he gives it to the steward of William and Mary. And then after the revolution's over, he comes and picks it back up. Okay. And then it's gone till like the 1840s. Nobody sees that original box with their regalia and their paperwork and things like that. Um, for like until like the 1840s when his son is like, "Hey, is anybody looking for this?" Um, so I've explained the skull, I've explained Cabell, and that he was kind of in possession of all their secrets. Now, getting into the significance of the actual skull and a skull cup in particular, or a skull punch bowl, something, some vessel to drink out of. Why is that important? Well, considering the Masons that were meeting in the Apollo room and who were also members of Phi Beta Kappa, and Thomas Jefferson, who was member of secret societies, and the claims of Bavarian Illuminati connections, and the why is that still up there? And the and what happens in the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, 32nd or 33rd degree, is that they drink part of the ritual, part of the initiation is drinking wine from a skull. Um, Now, if you search Google and say, "Do Masons drink wine from a skull?" you will find a million Masons saying, "No, it's never been a thing. It's never been a thing that we've done, not in the past, not in the future, not now. We don't drink wine from a skull. We don't drink blood from a skull." I'm here to tell you that I know for sure, for a fact, that they drink wine from a skull in one of their rituals. And I believe it's the 33rd degree or the 32nd degree, because I think 33rd is just an honorary degree. Maybe it's in both. Um, I know firsthand experience being in a lodge, we won't say which one, with a member of the lodge, we won't say who he is, being shown the armory of a lodge and him pointing to said skull and, saying, "You know what that's for?" And of course, I already knew what it was for, and I told him, and it kind of stopped him in his tracks. But it's a thing. They do it now. Whether it's human blood from a human skull is probably pretty doubtful, especially these days, or it's Kool-Aid from a plastic skull from Dollar Tree. Regardless, it is part of their ritual. It's part of their symbolism. It's supposed to, on the surface, I believe they say it represents, every man's mortality. Um, it might have deeper and darker connotations. I don't know. I don't really care, but it's a thing, and it's been a thing for a long time. And it's not only been a thing within Masonry, it's been a thing in a lot of occult groups. Drinking from a skull is a thing. Okay. Um, Now, when you consider the skull and the significance of the skull, all you got to do is look towards Freemasonic imagery. And at the Master Mason degree, and then at the death of Masons, memento mori and skulls and crossbones are everywhere. And so, I mean, these are just some of the examples of different. And again, this isn't an actual cup, it's there, and I didn't number these right, so there's even more examples behind this cup, of Masonic tracing boards, monuments, and bas reliefs on the sides of Masonic temples and the graves of Masonic people in the Masonic Brotherhood. um, there's a strong, almost obsessive um, link with the skull and crossbones. Now, does that come from these ossuaries, or does it come from the idea of the ossuaries? The Masons, they claim to trace their lineage all the way back to the Templars. Is this the secret that they're hiding, or is it just part of the shtick? You know, I don't know, but I know that it's part of what they ascribe to. Um, Now, so you've got the memento mori, and you've got the drinking wine out of a skull, whatever. I also think that it's significant that when you look back to who the Masons claim their lineage comes from, you're talking about the Knights Templar. Now, this is a 13th century Franciscan. This is a brazen skull, okay, that we talked about way earlier. Similar to what the Templars supposedly did divination rituals with. Okay, so this one here is the most famous brazen head, is the one allegedly made by 13th century Franciscan friar and philosopher. Oh, wow, I didn't even see this. Roger Bacon. In a 16th century account, Bacon asks the devil for advice. Satan tells him that the head will speak after a few weeks as long as it is powered by the continual fume of the six hottest simples plants used in alchemical medicine. When the magical creation finally speaks, Bacon is fast asleep and misses its words. Time is, time was, and time has passed. The chance to question his creation is about the secrets of the universe is gone, and the head explodes. Okay, I just looked for a brazen head, and this one looked like a real old one, so I copied and pasted it. I'm not sure if this Roger Bacon story is just a story, or if it's fiction. I know Roger Bacon was a real person, but I don't know where this account comes from. Anyway, in the Middle Ages to the early modern period, um, ownership was ascribed to late medieval scholars. Roger Bacon developed a reputation as wizards. They made these heads of brass, uh, and it was variously mechanical or magical. That's just a Wikipedia thing, but it sounded so crazy when I heard it in the accounts of what the Templars were accused of. I had to like find like some real world like reference to it, because it's crazy. So now I'm done sharing my screen, and we're just about done here. But going all the way back from the Templars up to modern day Masons, um, I think it's interesting that they're focused on the head or the skull, and the imagery that they use, and the skull and the crossbones being linked to the Templars, and then the pirates, and then this the skull and crossbones sitting on the top of these ossuaries, um, uh, which is the basis for the supposed big secret that the Templars were hiding, and that may have been passed down to um, the Freemasons of modern day. I'm sorry, my brain is mush now. I hope I didn't bore you guys too much. So yeah, don't forget about the brazen head, John the Baptist skull. Now was Blackbeard um one thing that's I just wanted to get to is that we're the colonists who supposedly had this head of Blackbeard dipped in silver and then drank out of it at their parties. Was this like a desecration? And I don't think that it was. I think it was veneration. I think when you look at this country, um, this Stuart Merovingian line kind of started the colonies over here. This was under Queen Elizabeth, Francis Bacon, Queen Elizabeth, and they were the line for the foreseeable future. And that did end about 100 years later. Um, but I think there might be some significance, and there might be a there as far as um, all these examples of Stuart line lovers, Merovingian folks in the New World, and I believe this was a example of venerating somebody who might have had the same type of leanings. This pirate, this free man pirate, Jacobite, Queen Anne's Revenge, sailing maniac. Um, uh, and yeah, I just think it points to a lot of ties between Masonry's ties to Scotland, the Templars, possibly Merovingian, the Stuart, and the Stuart beginnings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, that's enough for me and babbling alone in a closet by myself. So I am going to do a part two of this, and it'll get even more interesting. I think I'm going to get into the history of in Williamsburg with the head, who likely was the person who silvered or dipped or created the silver part of the skull, and what connections he has. Who else claimed to see it when it left the Williamsburg area? Because I think it did. Well, I think that it's clear that it did. So when it left, where I think it went, why I think it went there, and I'll probably get into a bunch of other possibilities of where it ended up, because there's a bunch of theories out there. I don't think they hold as much water as what I've been looking into. Um, but I just froze on the screen and that distracted me. But yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into uh, the Skull and Bones Society. We'll get a little bit more into Phi Beta Kappa and how that's linked, and kind of this this line from Blackbeard's head getting cut off to Thomas Jefferson. And okay, well, I think cut off. So that's it for me. Bye, guys. Well, I guess I'll sing to you guys, because this meeting's still being recorded, but not on the camera that I control the recording from. So I guess I can stop recording here. Okay, stop recording.